Please put your hands together and give a warm, hot welcome to our guest speaker, Minister Brian Linehan. God bless him, he's a very tall man. Not that tall. Chairman, very pleasant duty to be here in West Cork this afternoon. And first of all, may I say how great an honour it is to be invited to speak at this annual commemoration of the life and legacy of Michael Collins. When the generous and quite unexpected offer of the Collins family and the Commemoration Committee was conveyed to me, I was delighted to accept. I'm very conscious that while in recent years there has been a range of speakers at this event, this is the first occasion on which someone from the Fianna Fáil party has been given this privilege. It is true that over time the painful divisions from which emerged the two largest political parties in the state have more or less entirely healed. The differences between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are no longer defined by the Civil War, nor have they been for many, many years. It would be absurd if they were. This period of our history is gradually moving out of living memory. We expect those in Northern Ireland to live and work together, despite the carnage and grief of a much more recent and much more extended and protracted conflict. Nevertheless, keen competition between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael remains. I'm very aware of that every time I stand up in Dáil Éireann. But the power of symbolism cannot be denied, all the more so as we move towards the centenaries of the 1916 Rising and all that followed from that. And if today's commemoration can be seen as a further public act of historical reconciliation at one of Ireland's most sacred places, then I would be proud to have played my part in that regard. Now today, and it is of course on this day and to the day this year, the 22nd of August, that Michael Collins died, but today is the day to recall the remarkable qualities of a man who, along with Daniel O'Connell and Charles Stewart Parnell and Éamon de Valera, is part of our national pantheon. It was Dr. Garret Fitzgerald who wrote of the other three political leaders I mentioned that all of them had not only the capacity and the ability to play a major political role, but over a long period of time, but also the opportunity to do so. Dr. Fitzgerald added, there are others who, if they had lived, might have rivaled or even outshone some or all of these three, most notably Michael Collins in this century. Fine Gael has of course been the political custodian of the memory of Michael Collins, including at a time when some in Fianna Fáil were unwilling to recognise his importance and to salute his greatness. It may be that de Valera himself felt a sense of challenge from the ghost of Collins. Political partnerships certainly led to their followers championing one or the other. But notwithstanding that very real polarisation that took place after the Civil War, there was a lot more fluidity in the early decades of the state than perhaps modern historians and storytellers recall. My own paternal grandfather, Paddy Linehan, greatly admired General Collins and took the pro-treaty side in 1922. Indeed, he referred to this in Dáil Éireann in 1969, when the Troubles had erupted in Northern Ireland, and he recalled when he was a young student in Galway during the truce. Collins asked for volunteers to invade the north, and he remembered putting his name to it, he told the House. Looking back on it at the time, he thought it was rather foolish. Those were the things done in those days, but 1969, he said, was a different day, and he appealed to younger men to keep sane about these things, to catch themselves on. Later he joined Fianna Fáil. He was attracted in particular by Sean Lemass, who I think I can say shared many of the qualities he had admired in Collins, a talent for organisation, great energy and a modernising tendency. My other grandfather on my mother's side joined on Garda Síochána among the first recruits in 1922 and loyally served the state under governments of different complexions. I think de Valera's reputation may have suffered from the fact that he stayed on so long as Taoiseach and as leader of his party. But so much of our thinking about Collins is dominated by questions whose answers we will never know. One of the many imponderables that arise from his untimely death is the impact he would have had on the politics of the state had he lived. No man is fully formed at the age of 31. No public man, nobody in public life or public woman, in the light of recent controversies, I should say, no such person is fully formed for public life at the age of 31. Had Collins lived, would the Civil War have ended sooner? Would the legacy have been less bitter? What kind of leader would he have become? What kind of political party would he have shaped? Would the party to which I now belong have been preempted by the party he would have created? How would he have dealt with Northern Ireland and with Great Britain? These are very difficult, tantalising questions. Professor Lee wrote, almost any answer is plausible, depending on one's assumptions. Indeed, Professor Lee argues that students of Collins must spell out their assumptions explicitly so that the debate can take place on a proper historical plane and can be rescued from any propagandists and their purposes. But I think it's fair to say in recent decades, the full magnitude of Collins's achievements have come to be appreciated and valued by Irish men and Irish women right across the political spectrum. At times, and I think unnecessarily, it has been accompanied by a denigration of Eamon de Valera, as if only one of the two could win the approval of history. But even if we can never know how the relationship between Collins and de Valera might have evolved, surely now as a people we have the maturity to see that in their very different styles, both made huge contributions to the creation and development of our state. They shared much in terms of their devotion to Ireland, their interest in its language and culture, their piety, their social conservatism. They were temperamental opposites, but each was quickly identified by his peers as a natural leader. Neither was without flaws, but each had great strengths, and each was at different periods prepared to operate within the constraints of the realities facing him, without losing sight of a greater vision of a free, prosperous, distinctive and united Ireland. It is true that part of the healing process must be an acknowledgement, which has been aided by the work of modern historians like T. Ryle Dwyer and the late Peter Hart, that alongside great patriotism and self-sacrifice, terrible deeds were done on all sides during the War of Independence and the Civil War. We cannot know today how we as individuals might have thought or acted in that period and during those convulsive years. Nor must we forget that many with little or no connection to the struggle died or suffered by accident or because of where they worked or where they worshipped. But in the round, the generation which laid and built on the foundations of our modern state achieved remarkable things. Collins stood at the very forefront of that generation, and his qualities were remarkable. He was a man of energy and action, an astute politician, a man of extraordinary organisational and administrative ability, a pragmatist who believed he could bring to Ireland total freedom and independence, a driven, ambitious man who was born to be leader. I've been rereading some of Collins's biographies and historical analysis of his career. You must forgive me if I say I took a particular interest in his work as Minister for Finance between 1919 and 1922. Given the scale of the challenges I've had to meet, I was heartened by having to read about the scale of the challenges which he had to meet in his time and generation. In a meeting room in the Department of Finance, where I've spent a lot of time in the last 2 years, hang pictures of all the previous ministers, and they're in sequence. Historically, Owen MacNeill's portrait is the first, because he was actually the first to hold the office and the first at all, but he only served for 10 weeks. The picture of Michael Collins is placed second, and it regularly catches my eye. He's the youngest, and I dare say by a long stretch the best looking of us all.